On January 24, 2006, surveillance cameras at the Huntington on the Green apartment complex captured something that would haunt investigators for nearly 2 decades: a figure in white clothing, walking with purpose, abandoning a black Chevy Malibu. But here's what makes your blood run cold. The timestamp shows 12 hours p.m. Jennifer Kesse had been missing for over 12 hours, and whoever dumped her car knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see their face. 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse was living what many would call the perfect life. A successful finance manager at Central Florida Investments, she had just purchased her dream condo at the upscale Mosaic at Millenia Complex in Orlando. Smart, beautiful, and ambitious, Jennifer had everything going for her. She was planning a future with her boyfriend Rob Allen, who lived 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. Their relationship was solid, built on trust and regular communication. Every night, like clockwork, Jennifer would call her parents Drew and Joyce Kesse, and then Rob. It was a routine that would become crucial to understanding her disappearance. But something was happening at Mosaic that Jennifer found deeply unsettling. Construction workers had been renovating vacant units throughout the complex. These weren't just any workers. Jennifer had complained to friends and family about their behavior. They would catcall her, follow her with their eyes, make inappropriate comments as she walked to her car. The harassment had become so uncomfortable that Jennifer developed a system. She would stay on the phone with her father Drew whenever workers were present in her building. She never ever let workers stay in her apartment unsupervised. This detail becomes absolutely critical when you consider what investigators discovered years later. One of the painters questioned in Jennifer's case told police that she had instructed him to lock up when he finished working in her apartment. But according to Jennifer's family and friends, she would never have done this. Jennifer had a strict policy about workers. She never left them alone. This painter was lying, and the question that keeps investigators awake at night is why. January 23, 2006. Started like any other Monday for Jennifer. She had just returned from a weekend vacation in St. Croix with Rob. Her brother Logan and his friend Travis had stayed at her condo while she was away, which was completely normal. Jennifer arrived back Sunday evening, and Logan and Travis left Monday morning. Jennifer went to work as usual at Central Florida Investments. Colleagues remember her being in good spirits, discussing her vacation and her normal daily routine. But here's where the timeline becomes crucial to understanding what really happened. That evening, Jennifer spoke with Rob around 9:15 p.m. Their conversation lasted about 15 minutes. They talked about their respective days, made plans for Rob to visit that weekend, and ended the call around 9:30 p.m. At approximately 10 p.m., Jennifer called her parents. The conversation was routine. She was tired from her first day back at work after vacation. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Drew Kesse would later say this was the last time anyone in Jennifer's family heard her voice. Cell phone records show that Jennifer's phone was turned off sometime between 10:40 p.m. on January 23rd and 8 a.m. on January 24th. This timing is absolutely critical because it suggests that whatever happened to Jennifer began the night before she was supposed to go to work. Think about this. Why would Jennifer turn off her phone at night? She never did this. Someone else turned off that phone, and they did it to prevent anyone from tracking her location or calling for help. The most compelling theory about what happened next involves one of the construction workers at Mosaic. Specifically, a painter who had been working inside vacant units throughout the complex. Enhanced analysis of the surveillance footage from Huntington on the Green reveals that the person abandoning Jennifer's car is wearing what appears to be white painter's overalls. Not just white clothing, but the specific uniform worn by professional painters. This painter had likely been obsessing over Jennifer for weeks, maybe months. He had access to the building through his work. He knew her routine. He had seen her coming and going every day. When Jennifer went on vacation and he didn't see her for several days, he may have panicked, thinking she had moved out, especially when he saw Logan and Travis staying in her apartment. But on Monday, January 23rd, when Jennifer returned from vacation, He realized this was his opportunity. Here's what likely happened that Monday night. The painter had been planning this for some time. He had identified one of the vacant units he was working in as the perfect location for his attack. These units were empty, soundproofed for renovation work, and he had legitimate access to them. He may have even prepared restraints and other materials in advance, knowing he would need time to carry out his assault without interruption. After Jennifer's final phone call with her parents at 10 p.m., she likely prepared for bed as usual. But the painter was waiting. He had a master key to Jennifer's apartment, or at least access to one. These keys were common among construction workers at the complex for legitimate renovation work. Between 10:40 p.m., when Jennifer's phone was turned off, and the early morning hours of January 24th, he entered her apartment. The evidence suggests Jennifer was not killed in her own apartment. Her bed appeared to have been slept in, but was hastily made the next morning. The shower was wet, but not arranged as Jennifer typically left it. Her work clothes were laid out, but not in her usual meticulous style. Someone else had been in that apartment after Jennifer disappeared, staging the scene to make it appear she had prepared for a normal day at work. Instead, the painter likely forced Jennifer at knife point or gunpoint to one of the vacant units he had access to. This explains why there were no signs of a major struggle in her apartment. He controlled her from the moment of entry. Once in the vacant unit, he had complete privacy to assault and murder Jennifer over a period of several hours. The soundproofing from renovation work would have prevented anyone from hearing her screams, but the painter was smart enough to realize that people would be looking for Jennifer when she didn't show up for work. If her car remained in the Mosaic parking garage, investigators would immediately focus their search on the building. He needed to create the illusion that Jennifer had left the complex on her own. So he took her keys from her purse and drove her car away from Mosaic. The choice of dump site for Jennifer's car reveals just how calculated this crime was. Huntington on the Green was approximately 1 mile from Mosaic at Millennia. The painter had clearly scouted this location in advance. He knew about the surveillance cameras, but more importantly, he knew exactly where to park the car so that fence posts would obscure his face when he walked away. This wasn't luck. This was planning. The surveillance footage shows the figure walking away from Jennifer's car at exactly 12 p.m. on January 24th. The timestamp is crucial because it gave the painter nearly 14 hours from the time Jennifer's phone was turned off to dispose of her body, clean up evidence, stage her apartment, and abandon her car. 14 hours is more than enough time to drive Jennifer's body deep into the Florida Everglades, where it might never be found. But recent forensic analysis has revealed something even more disturbing about the crime scene. Enhanced photos of Jennifer's car hood show what appear to be handprints and drag marks. Drew Kesse described these marks as looking like someone had been thrown down on the hood with arms spread out, then dragged across the surface. This suggests that Jennifer may have fought back at some point, possibly when she was being moved from the vacant apartment to her car for the final disposal of her body. The evidence points to a level of violence that goes beyond a simple abduction. The handprints and drag marks suggest Jennifer was physically overpowered, possibly multiple times during her ordeal. The fact that these marks were on the hood of her car, not inside it, indicates that Jennifer may have been placed on or thrown onto her car during the attack. The implications are horrifying. What makes this theory even more compelling is the behavior patterns of construction workers that Jennifer had documented before her disappearance. She had complained to multiple people about their inappropriate behavior. These weren't casual comments. These were documented concerns about men who were making her feel unsafe in her own home. Jennifer was a smart woman who recognized predatory behavior when she saw it. The painter theory also explains the sophisticated nature of this crime. This wasn't a random attack by a stranger. This was a carefully planned assault by someone who had intimate knowledge of Jennifer's routine, the building layout, security camera locations, and renovation schedules. Only someone working inside the building would have had access to all of this information. Consider the logistics involved. The perpetrator needed access to Jennifer's apartment, access to a vacant unit for the assault, knowledge of camera locations for staging the car abandonment, and several hours of uninterrupted time to carry out his plan. A construction worker, specifically a painter with master keys, fits this profile perfectly. The timing of the attack also supports this theory. Monday night to Tuesday morning would have been perfect for a construction worker. He could have committed the assault during off hours when the building was quiet, then returned to work Tuesday morning, as if nothing had happened. His presence in the building would have seemed completely normal to other residents and security personnel. But here's what's most disturbing about this case. The painter who lied to police about being alone with Jennifer in her apartment was never properly investigated as a suspect. Despite fabricating a story about Jennifer giving him permission to lock up her apartment, something her family insists she would never have done, he apparently passed a lie detector test regarding her disappearance and was cleared of involvement. But lie detector tests are notoriously unreliable, especially when administered to someone who has had time to prepare for questioning. If this painter had been planning Jennifer's abduction for weeks or months, he would have had plenty of time to rehearse his responses and develop his cover story. The fact that he felt the need to lie about his interaction with Jennifer suggests he was trying to establish an alibi for having been inside her apartment. What's even more troubling is that this painter's lie created reasonable doubt about his involvement when it should have made him the primary suspect. Why would an innocent person fabricate a story about being alone with a murder victim in her apartment? The only logical explanation is that he was trying to cover up evidence of his presence in Jennifer's home. The investigation into Jennifer's disappearance has been hampered by missed opportunities and jurisdictional complications from the beginning. The Orlando Police Department initially treated this as a missing person case rather than a potential abduction. Crucial evidence may have been compromised during those first critical hours when investigators didn't realize the severity of the situation. But the family has never given up hope. Drew and Joyce Kesse have spent nearly 2 decades fighting for answers. They've hired private investigators, commissioned independent forensic analysis, and maintained constant pressure on law enforcement to keep Jennifer's case active. Their dedication has generated new leads and kept Jennifer's story in the public eye when it might otherwise have been forgotten. The release of enhanced surveillance footage and crime scene photos in recent years has provided unprecedented insight into what may have happened to Jennifer. The evidence of a violent struggle on her car hood, the figure in painter's clothing abandoning her vehicle, and the calculated timing of events all point to a meticulously planned attack by someone with inside knowledge of the Mosaic complex. Recent developments in the case have also revealed additional evidence that supports the painter theory. Analysis of Jennifer's cell phone records shows that her phone was accessing towers in areas where construction workers from Mosaic would have been familiar. The phone's final pings came from locations that someone unfamiliar with Orlando would be unlikely to know about, but that local workers would have encountered during their daily commutes. If you're watching this and starting to piece together the same connections that investigators have been working on for nearly 2 decades, you're beginning to understand just how calculated this crime really was. This wasn't a random abduction. This was a predator who used his legitimate access to Jennifer's building to carry out one of the most sophisticated disappearances in recent memory. The construction timeline at Mosaic also reveals crucial details about the opportunity for this crime. Renovations had been ongoing for months before Jennifer's disappearance. Workers had established routines and relationships within the building. They knew which residents lived alone, which apartments were vacant, and how to move through the building without attracting attention. For a predator with access to master keys, Jennifer would have been an ideal target. What makes Jennifer's case so haunting is the realization that her safety precautions weren't enough to protect her. She recognized the threat posed by construction workers. She developed systems to avoid being alone with them. She documented their inappropriate behavior, but ultimately, her attacker found a way around every precaution she had taken. The evidence suggests that Jennifer fought for her life, The struggle marks on her car hood indicate she didn't go quietly. She fought back against her attacker, even when the situation seemed hopeless. This physical evidence may ultimately be the key to identifying her killer, as it could contain DNA or other forensic evidence that wasn't available to investigators in 2006. Recent advances in forensic technology have made it possible to extract DNA evidence from surfaces that were previously thought to be unusable. The handprints and drag marks on Jennifer's car hood represent the most promising source of physical evidence in this case. If investigators can successfully extract DNA from these areas, they may finally be able to identify Jennifer's attacker definitively. The painter theory becomes even more compelling when you consider the psychological profile of Jennifer's attacker. This was someone who had been fantasizing about assaulting her for an extended period, someone who had access to her daily routine and living situation, someone who felt entitled to take what he wanted from a woman who had made it clear she wasn't interested in his attention. The harassment Jennifer experienced from construction workers wasn't just inappropriate workplace behavior. It was predatory testing. These men were gauging her reactions, identifying her vulnerabilities, and planning their approach. For one of them, the harassment escalated into obsession, and obsession escalated into violence. The fact that Jennifer's case remains unsolved after nearly 18 years is a testament to how carefully her attacker planned this crime. But it's also a reminder that even the most sophisticated criminals make mistakes. The surveillance footage, the physical evidence on Jennifer's car, and the lies told by at least one construction worker all represent cracks in what the perpetrator thought was a perfect crime. If you've been following this analysis and are as convinced as many investigators that Jennifer's disappearance was orchestrated by someone working inside her building, share this information with anyone who might have additional details about the construction work at Mosaic at Millennia in early 2006. The smallest detail could be the key to finally solving this case. The truth about what happened to Jennifer Kesse may have been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. A construction worker who used his legitimate access to her building to carry out an elaborate abduction and murder. Someone who thought he had covered his tracks perfectly but left behind evidence that continues to point back to him. Jennifer Kesse deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. And somewhere out there, the person responsible for her disappearance is still walking free, possibly still working in construction, possibly still targeting other women. Until this case is solved, no woman living in a building undergoing renovation can feel completely safe. The evidence is clear, the timeline is established, the method has been identified. Now it's up to law enforcement to follow the leads that point directly to the construction workers who had access to Jennifer's building in January 2006. After nearly 18 years of investigation, it's time to bring Jennifer Kesse home and hold her killer accountable for one of the most calculated crimes in recent memory.